Welcome back into the channel, guys. Today I have another video for you, and it's actually pertaining to drafting and scouting and things of that nature here in Madden 20. Just consolidating some more of the information that's out there and letting you guys know what you can utilize to your advantage here in Madden 20. And today we're going to be talking about if there is a way to determine if a player has superstar development or a specific development trait prior to entering the draft, and that is just by scouting them and looking at their abilities. So, the first thing that I want to talk about is actually not on the draft board. I want to go to the news page, and I want to figure out where the news stories are, because in past years, you used to have videos, or used to have news articles here that would basically indicate which players were going to be really good for you. In the draft stories, in prior years, it would pop up from week to week, and they would basically tell you which players are going to be superstars or superstar X factors by popping up with draft stories like this. They would say things like that one from Todd McShay: Eric Smith exceeded expectations on his pro day, making his way up the linebacker rankings. But in prior years, and even in this year, there are going to be stories that are going to pop up with the player on it, and it's going to be like, you know, this guy's following in his father's footsteps, he has basically the football DNA in his blood, or this guy's really good for this, that, or the other reason, and those are the players that you're going to want to look out for. However, this year, it's not a guarantee that those guys are going to have a specific development trait. In past years, players that would pop up on the Draft Stories news board would pretty much be guaranteed to have superstar development. But this year, it is more than likely that they're going to have star development. Some of them will have superstar development. Some of them might have X Factor. But for the most part, players that pop up on the Draft Stories board are going to have at least star development. So you can pretty much guarantee that those players are going to be good. Even if they don't have star development, they're going to have a higher overall. They're going to have good abilities. So you definitely want to keep an eye out for the Draft Stories as they pop up throughout the year. If you want to do a better job at drafting players, you're going to want to pay attention to the Draft Stories as they pop up week by week, and you'll be able to identify some of the better players in this class. Now, a good example of this is Matt Miller up at the top. He says, tough to pick a clear leader out of this year's O-line draft class, but the smart choice would be Dexter Saxton. So if we go over to the draft board, you're going to be able to identify the fact that Dexter Saxton is probably the best linebacker out of the bunch. If you look at the overall draft board, he's the #1 offensive lineman on the board. I'm actually considering taking him. I was able to trade for the Eagles draft pick this year, and I have the 4th overall pick in the draft, so I'm considering taking him. And it pretty much lines up with the news story. He is definitely one of the best players in the draft, and you compare him to some of the other players. There are really good players at other positions, but the news story is essentially telling me that Dexter Saxton is going to be the best lineman in this draft class, and you can pretty much rely on that because that also lines up with his combine report, which shows that he's pretty much first in everything. He's slightly lower in broad jump, slightly lower in bench press. That strength rating has me concerned a little bit, but you can tell that he is basically going to be the best lineman, at least in terms of overall. And you can be pretty sure that he's at least going to have star development because he was included in that news story. Now, it's less reliable than it has been in previous years. Like I said, in previous years, those news stories pretty much guaranteed you that that player was going to be a superstar, but that is not the case anymore, although it does give them a higher chance. Now, the other things that you're going to want to pay attention to, and the reason I'm doing this video right now is because we are in the off-season free agency week 4, which is the last opportunity to scout before the draft. We are the very last stage before the draft, and some things change as you get to this point. What you'll see at this point is that some players will start to actually jump up the draft board, and some players will actually not even have combine grades. So a great example of this is this right tackle, Lance Stratton. Lance Stratton wasn't on the draft board to begin with. I had every single right tackle from round 1 through 7 scouted, and all of a sudden, these two guys, Lance Stratton and actually DeMar Bussey, popped up onto my board and said, oh, they're actually a 7th round pick, and this guy's actually a 5th round pick. And I was like, okay, that's a little bit odd, but maybe that makes sense because he had a huge combine grade. And so I scouted him, and it turns out that he's actually listed as a first-round talent. And so this is a guy that you can have a pretty good idea of what his development's going to be. You can be pretty sure that this guy's going to end up having star or better development because of the fact that he wasn't up here to begin with, and then he just popped in. Now, I don't know if these players are technically listed as undrafted players, or if they are just added in late. I've noticed in the past that some players seem to pop up out of nowhere. They weren't even on the list to begin with, and they will pop up whenever you hit certain stages of the offseason and stuff like that, and they'll be added into the draft. So make sure that you don't miss players like this that just randomly pop up into your draft board because you might have said, okay, I've scouted every single right tackle, and then you don't even come back to this position, and then you see, oh wait, there's this guy here. You probably don't even need to scout them to know that they're going to be good if that is the case. You can be pretty sure that this is going to be a good player. You can just go based off of his combine grade alone that he is like first, second, or third in pretty much everything. And you can be pretty sure that he's going to have star or better development. Like I said, it's not a guarantee, but it is a higher probability that this guy is going to have a better development than the people that are around him because of the fact that he was like put in here by the game late and is saying like, oh, this guy is all of a sudden better than we thought he was, or something like that. So those are the guys that you want to look for if you want to have a better draft development grade. And similarly to that, not even guys that pop up like that, but guys that are projected to be a higher round than what they're, or guys that are a higher round talent than what they're projected to be, have a higher chance of having a good dev upgrade challenge for you. Now, a lot of this stuff has already been covered in some of my other videos about drafting and stuff, but I really want to emphasize the dev traits and what is important to those today. And so another great example of that would be a guy like Mark Rudolph. Mark Rudolph is a guy that is a first round talent, but was listed as a fourth round projected player. This guy is going to have a decent chance at having like star development. Generally speaking, players outside of the first round aren't going to have superstar. And we'll come back to this in a minute, but pretty much the way that it works is you're drafting a superstar if you're drafting in like the top 10, top 15. You get what you pay for. They're not totally randomized. You're pretty much guaranteed to get that type of player up in the top rounds. Now, you might get a bust, especially if you draft somebody that is not supposed to go up there. If you draft somebody that's true talent is lower, that might end up being a bust for you. But generally speaking, the superstars, from most people's experiences and most of the research that's gone on and most of the randomization of draft class that we've experienced, most of the superstars and superstar X factors are going to fall within the top end of the draft. So superstar X factors are pretty much going to be top 10, top 5 picks. Anything below that, you start to get into like the mid first round. You're looking at potential superstars, mostly stars. And then once you get in past like pick 20 and so on, you're probably looking at star potential players. That's a pretty consistent way to look at it. Some of these players will have normal, some of them won't have star, some of them might have superstar. You might find a guy that's like a late first rounder like Christian Lockley that might end up having superstar or something like that. It is slightly randomized, but for the most part, you can predict where they're going to be based on where they're projected to be drafted. They wouldn't project this quarterback to be the first overall quarterback and be so far ahead of these other quarterbacks that are below him, and they wouldn't project this guy to be a second-round player or say his talent's a second-round player if Sidney Hoskins didn't have at least star development. It's pretty much guaranteed that this guy has star. He's probably going to have superstar. Juan Gonzalez might even have a dev trait, even though it says he's a second-round talent. And so that's something that you can take into account, is if they're projected to be a first-round player, even if they're a bust like Juan Gonzalez, even if you took him in the first round, he might still have a dev trait. Just because he's a bust doesn't mean he doesn't have a dev trait. He is still a second-round player. He's projected to be the first overall pick. He could still have a dev trait. His actual physical attributes just might not be that good. As you can see, he only has A throw power compared to A+ throw power. And that's what determines whether their value is listed as a first round player or not. He is technically a second round player, so he's probably in like the low 70s as a as a player. So he's more of a second round talent, but his dev trait might be high. And so you might still want to take a shot on a guy like Juan Gonzalez. If he falls to the second round to you, he might still have a good dev trait for you to utilize. Don't just automatically turn these guys away that pop up red for you, because that guy's still a second round talent. He could still be a pretty good quarterback for you. So those are a couple of the first ways that you can tell if a player has a good trait or not. The other way is I have to find guys like Dre LeBlanc. A guy like Dre LeBlanc that doesn't have a combine grade. These guys are guys that skip the combine. Some of these guys just get popped in here late. I feel like I've seen guys just pop up out of nowhere on here before. And what you want to consider is that these guys are also guys that have a potential to have a high dev trait. Now, why would Dre LeBlanc be considered a first-round talent? You look at his ratings, he only has B+ finesse move, he's only got B tackle, and he's only got B- block shedding. So his intangible grades are not very good, which means that he probably has very good physical attributes. He's probably a very strong, very athletic defensive end that is making up for that and making his overall high enough that it says he's a first-round talent. Now, the other thing to consider into that is he might have a higher dev trait. For some reason, he decided to skip the combine, and those are players that stick out. Those are players that are special, even though you can't see their combine grades. So you are taking a chance not knowing what his attributes are, but from my experience, guys that don't enter the combine do have a higher percentage probability of actually having a high dev trait. So no, there is no way to 100% tell what a player's dev trait is before you pick them. I can't point at a guy and say, oh, Sidney Hoskins is going to have superstar X Factor, or, oh, Stephon Everett is going to have superstar. I can't tell you that for sure, but some of these factors can contribute to it this year, and you can tell still whether they're going to be good or not based on what you're seeing. And all of those factors combine to say, if a guy has a good combine grade and you're seeing good intangible grades, and he's projected to be a top 5 pick, this guy probably has superstar X factor. You look at Stephon Everett and you say he's good in every single category. He's a top 3 pick. That guy's pretty much guaranteed to have at least superstar. You can pretty confidently say that. Now, even if he didn't have superstar, I want you guys to keep in mind that you could turn that guy into a superstar based on how good he freaking is. So keep that in mind. No, you can't tell 100% what a player's trait is going to be before you draft them, but you can tell players that are going to have a higher percentage probability of having a good draft grade. Now, I will say, technically speaking, there is one way that you can tell whether a player has a good draft grade or whether a player has a good dev trait or not, and it's cheating. You have to be able to edit the draft class, which means you have to have commissioner powers, and if you click in that L3 button and you click in and edit players, you will be able to see what a player's development grade is. However, I don't recommend you do that. I just figure I would tell you that in the event that you're maybe playing a single player league and, just for whatever reason, you want to know who's good or not. You go in, you find out who's good, and then you draft that player. That's fine. However you choose to use that information is up to you, but you can go in and click edit players, and without ever editing anybody, you can just click into them and see what their dev trait is by looking at their player traits tab. And it will tell you right away. Super quick, super simple. So technically, you can figure out what it is prior to the draft, but in a legitimate way, no, you cannot figure out what their trait is prior to the draft. Hopefully this information gets to you guys and gives you some help on how to get higher dev players in the draft. Like I said, looking at the news articles, looking for players that don't have combine grades, looking for players like this right tackle that pop in late, that just pop up out of nowhere and it says that they're good. Those types of players are going to have a higher chance for you. And then in addition to that, you can be pretty certain that you're getting what you pay for if you get a high overall pick. Like, I traded for the Eagles pick this year knowing that they weren't going to be very good in their division just based on the way the teams have played out in the past couple seasons. And I said, you know what? I want this to be a top 10 pick because I want to have that chance to actually get a Superstar X Factor added into my team. And I'm giving myself the highest chance to actually get that player by having the 4th overall pick. I'm pretty much insured to get one of these players. I might take Saxton as a kind of a little bit of a reach. I'm a little bit worried about doing that because being that he's the 8th overall player, he might not have Superstar X Factor. If Stephon Everett is there at the 4th pick, I pretty much have to take him because based on all of the combined factors, he looks like an absolute monster. Even though I don't necessarily need him, I could take him and shift some players around to allow me to use him. So that's definitely a way to help tell what a player's trait is. The other thing, and actually I forgot to mention this, and I should have said this earlier, the other thing that can help you tell what a player's depth trait is, I've found in my personal experience that the older the player is, the higher chance they have at a dev trait upgrade. So they don't, generally speaking, from my experience, give like the 20 and 21-year-olds Superstar X Factor very often. So when you look at a guy like Sidney Hoskins, he might just be like a superstar, might just be a star because he's only 21 years old. But when you look at a guy like Stephon Everett, he's 24 years old, which means his development window is cut short, and the game tends to compensate for that by giving them a higher dev trait. And so Stephon Everett, in my opinion, is probably the highest likelihood player here of a player that would have Superstar X Factor. Now, that's not going to be 100% the case. That's just a trend that I've noticed over my time playing franchises this year. Just something I wanted you guys to be aware of. And if you guys are aware of something different, definitely drop that down in the comment section and let me know what you guys know. Because, you know, I don't play a billion franchises. I don't have all the research and I don't know everything about the game. All I can tell you is what I've seen in my experience that works and what I've seen in the past and what was confirmed in the past in prior games to actually work. So hopefully this helps you guys out in some way. If it does, leave a like down below. Leave a comment down below what you guys would like to see next. Leave a comment if you guys know some more information about how you can tell which players are better. That would definitely help out. Honestly, I'm still playing Madden all the way up until this day, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. So, you know, I'm not going off Madden anytime soon, and the more tips you guys give me, the better, and the more things I can make videos about. And in addition to that, if you are new to the channel, please subscribe down below for more videos. I come at you guys Monday through Friday pretty much with a video every week, every day. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Hope you guys have a good weekend.